Hello there, and welcome to the Quantum Secrets channel. Tonight we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating and complex world of personality, that unique combination of traits, memories, and emotions that makes you, well, you. Personality is like the fingerprint of your mind, yet it's ever-changing, like a wisp of smoke. It can be influenced by the genes passed down from your family or by the significant events that shape your life. Within it, you'll find our courage, our anxieties, our kindness, our sense of humor, and the subconscious patterns that guide how we love, how we think, and how we see the world around us. Science is still working to understand how all these pieces fit together, from the smallest molecules to the most cherished memories, from our passing thoughts to our overall temperament. So tonight we're going to explore this inner universe, looking at what makes each of us both undeniably human and wonderfully unique. If you enjoy these quiet, reflective explorations, please consider liking, subscribing, or sharing your thoughts in the comments below. It helps others find their way here, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, just take a deep breath. Let your eyelids get heavy and allow the wonder of your mind to embrace your thoughts. Let's begin this journey. Your personality is partly determined by your DNA. Hidden deep within your cells are codes that give clues as to who you might become. Certain DNA sequences affect how sensitive you are to rewards, how quickly you bounce back from stressful situations, and how you deal with your emotions. Genes influence the structure of the brain regions that govern impulse control, empathy, and attention. But your DNA isn't the only factor. Every experience in your life, every friendship, every heartbreak, interacts with these inherited tendencies, modifying them through chemical changes that switch genes on or off. Scientists refer to this interaction between biology and experience as epigenetics, an ongoing dialogue that continues throughout your entire life. Your personality isn't set in stone. It's a living reflection of both your ancestry and your experiences, constantly adapting as your cells respond to the world around you. Identical twins who are raised in separate environments still often have surprisingly similar personalities. For decades, twin studies have revealed remarkable consistency between siblings who were separated at birth. They often share not only similar tastes in art or humor, but also strangely similar life choices, from their chosen careers to the way they laugh. These similarities suggest a strong genetic component to temperament. However, the subtle differences, the small quirks shaped by their individual environments, show the amazing flexibility of personality. Genes may provide a foundation, but experience writes the story. Even without a shared upbringing, twins frequently mirror each other's emotional rhythms, decision-making processes, and reactions to stressful events, suggesting that the framework of personality has deep biological roots. At the same time, the differences between them demonstrate that environment, context, and chance still play a role in shaping something completely unique. In every pair of twins, nature and nurture come together, like two artists painting the same portrait in slightly different lighting. The way your brain is wired influences how introverted or extroverted you are. Inside your head, billions of neurons form complex networks of electrical communication. When scientists map these neural networks using brain imaging techniques, distinct patterns emerge. Extroverted people often show stronger connections between the brain's reward centers and attention networks, making them more attracted to social interaction and new experiences. Introverted brains, on the other hand, tend to have greater internal connectivity, particularly in areas associated with introspection, memory, and imagination. This internal wiring favors depth over breadth, quiet focus over constant engagement. Neither pattern is better than the other. They simply represent different ways of navigating the world. One thrives on external energy, while the other thrives on inner balance. Just as no two fingerprints are alike, no two neural networks are identical. Personality arises from the way these neural pathways work together, creating the rhythm of thought that defines how each of us relates to others, to solitude, and to ourselves. Your default brain network can affect how much you daydream. When your mind wanders, it activates what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a group of brain regions that become active during imagination, memory and self-reflection. People who spend more time lost in thought tend to have stronger connections within this network. It's like a mental playground that connects distant ideas and possibilities. Daydreamers aren't simply easily distracted. They're practicing creativity, empathy, and problem-solving without even realizing it. Studies suggest that the quality of your inner world, whether it's filled with curiosity or anxiety, reflects the activity level of this network. In calm minds, it generates visions and insights. In restless minds, it can amplify worries. The same circuitry that allows us to escape into fantasy also helps us understand others, plan for the future, and create art. In the quiet theater of your mind, your brain rehearses countless versions of reality before you ever speak a word. Certain genes influence how optimistic or anxious you tend to be. Among the many elements of our genetic makeup, some help regulate neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which influence our emotional state. Variations in these genes can affect how easily we experience feelings of calm or anxiety, hope or worry. For example, people with a specific version of the serotonin transporter gene may be more sensitive to stress, while others may have a natural resilience. However, genetics only open the door. Environment and learning determine whether we walk through it. Mindset, upbringing, and even diet can influence these chemical balances. Optimism, then, isn't a fixed trait, but a dynamic state that arises from the interaction of biology and perspective. Your genes may suggest tendencies, but your experiences and choices determine how strongly those tendencies manifest. Emotional outlook becomes a collaboration between molecules and meaning. Even a single change in one letter of your DNA can affect your temperament. The entire human genome is written in a language of approximately 3 billion letters, and sometimes a single misplaced letter can have a ripple effect on behavior. A change in just one base pair within a gene can subtly alter how a neurotransmitter receptor functions, affecting sensitivity to fear, novelty, or social reward. While these changes are small, they can shift the brain's chemical balance, influencing patterns of curiosity or caution. These molecular variations don't dictate destiny, they simply fine-tune the instrument of the mind. Over generations, they become part of the evolutionary experiment of personality, providing diversity to a species that thrives on adaptation. In one person, this small variation might inspire boldness. In another, it might encourage careful reflection. Every human psyche contains countless micro-edits, each one a biological brushstroke in the grand portrait of individuality. Stress in early childhood can alter personality development for life. When a child's world is filled with unpredictability or fear, their developing brain adapts to survive. Hormone systems that regulate emotion become hypersensitive, preparing the body for constant alertness. This can lead to adult personalities characterized by caution, anxiety, or deep empathy for others who are suffering. However, resilience often grows from the same ground. Supportive relationships, even with just one caring adult, can lessen these effects, teaching the nervous system to feel safe again. Over time, neural pathways that were once attuned to danger can be rewired toward calm and trust. The imprint of early stress may never disappear completely, but it can evolve into strength. An intuitive understanding of other people is pain or a strong desire for stability. The story of personality doesn't begin solely with fixed biology, but with how young brains learn to cope with the challenges and joys of their earliest environments. Your personality can subtly change after long-term meditation. Consistent meditation does more than simply quiet the mind, it actually reshapes its structure. Brain imaging studies show increased thickness in areas linked to attention, compassion, and emotional regulation. As awareness deepens, people often report feeling less reactive, more open, and more patient. The practice trains the nervous system to pause before reacting impulsively, gently modifying traits like impulsivity or neuroticism. Over months and years, the daily practice of returning to your breath becomes a neurological exercise in equanimity. Personality, once thought to be stable in adulthood, can bend slightly under the steady pressure of mindfulness. Where the mind once chased thoughts, it now observes them. Where emotions once controlled behavior, they now pass like the weather. Meditation, practiced long enough, becomes a quiet sculptor, reshaping temperament from the inside out, breath by breath, little by little. Sleep quality affects how agreeable or irritable you feel day to day. When you don't get enough rest, the brain's emotional circuits become disrupted. The prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate impulses and empathy, loses its balance with the amygdala, the center of threat perception. This can lead to a shorter temper, decreased patience, and a reduced capacity for connection. People who consistently sleep well tend to have better emotional regulation and score higher on agreeableness scales in personality studies. Even small improvements in sleep, earlier bedtimes, darker rooms, more relaxing evenings, can improve mood and outlook. Sleep acts as a nightly maintenance routine, clearing away metabolic waste from neurons and restoring chemical balance. Without it, our minds become foggy and reactive. With it, we rediscover kindness, humor, and perspective. Every sleep cycle becomes a practice in emotional balance, reminding us that a well-rested brain isn't just sharper, but also gentler. Gut bacteria may influence mood and personality stability. The microbiome in your intestines forms a living ecosystem that communicates directly with the brain through the vagus nerve and chemical messengers. Certain bacterial species produce neurotransmitters like serotonin and gamma-aminobutyric acid, GABA, which affect anxiety, optimism, and resilience. When this inner environment is balanced, the brain receives calmer signals. When it's disrupted, stress responses intensify. Studies on probiotics suggest that changing the composition of gut bacteria can subtly alter emotional tone and even social behavior. It's as if a hidden chorus of microbes contributes to the soundtrack of your personality. Your mood, patience, and confidence aren't just the result of your thoughts, but also of digestion, diet, and microbial balance. Within the quiet depths of your gut, trillions of tiny organisms hum along with your nervous system, composing part of the music that makes you feel like yourself. Introverts process dopamine differently than extroverts. Dopamine is often referred to as the feel-good chemical, but its real purpose is related to motivation and reward seeking. Brains that lean toward extroversion tend to respond to dopamine like a green light. Loud environments, surprises, fast-paced social energy, new faces and new opportunities all register as exciting and pleasurable. For introverted brains, the same amount of stimulation can feel overwhelming, even stressful, as if the volume is simply too high. Introverts often find that calm focus, depth, and meaningful conversations feel more satisfying than thrills or stimulation. This is partly because they rely more on slower, quieter neurochemical reward systems that are linked to reflection and understanding rather than constant novelty seeking. So it's not that introverts secretly want to be alone because they dislike people. It's that their nervous systems are tuned to a quieter setting. They find comfort in stillness, gentle environments, and connections that breathe instead of shout. Both patterns are intelligent in their own way. One explores outward, the other explores inward. The prefrontal cortex is more active in conscientious people. The prefrontal cortex, located just behind your forehead, helps you plan ahead, resist temptation, and stay organized in a world that constantly tries to pull your attention in different directions. People who are highly conscientious, meaning they are reliable, structured, careful, and follow through on their commitments, tend to show greater activity in this brain region. This means that their mental braking system is always available, so impulses don't immediately translate into actions. They pause, they evaluate, they ask, is this a good idea? This constant micro-regulation is part of why conscientious people are often described as dependable. They anticipate consequences before things get out of hand. However, there is a price to pay. Living in a state of constant planning can create pressure, guilt, or fear of letting others down. But it also supports long-term goals, healthy habits, and self-respect. The prefrontal cortex is, in a way, the quiet guardian of promise-keeping. People who score high on openness have more cross-brain connectivity. Openness to experience is the personality trait associated with curiosity, imagination, a love of unusual ideas, and a thirst for novelty. People high in openness often have greater communication between brain regions that usually remain somewhat separate in others. Areas that handle logic start to interact more smoothly with areas that handle emotion. Sensory areas that process sound and color share information with areas that handle memory and language. This creates a flexible inner world where unexpected combinations of thoughts can emerge. Someone like this might hear a piece of music and instantly see colors in their mind, or hear a single sentence and jump to a completely new idea about how the world could work. This constant blending also explains why highly open people tolerate uncertainty. Where others see confusion, they see opportunity. Their brain is literally built to remix ideas. It's a creativity engine that continually generates new maps of reality. Neuroticism is linked to stronger emotional memory traces. Neuroticism refers to a tendency toward worry, tension, or mood swings. It's sometimes viewed as a flaw, but it actually reflects a particular nervous system strategy. In people who score high on neuroticism, emotional experiences, particularly painful or threatening ones, are often stored in memory more vividly and permanently. The brain regions that help store memories and those that detect danger communicate with each other with extra intensity. As a result, embarrassment, loss, and fear can linger for a long time. This can make daily life more difficult because even small stresses feel personal and urgent. However, this heightened recall also provides something valuable: rapid awareness of potential harm, social tension, or dishonesty. It builds sensitivity to the emotional states of others, and it pushes the mind to look for patterns in order to anticipate problems before they arise. What looks like nervousness is also a form of deep vigilance. Highly agreeable people show more synchronized brain activity with others. Agreeableness describes traits like kindness, warmth, patience, and a willingness to cooperate rather than dominate. When agreeable people interact, their brains tend to enter a state of resonance with the people around them. Neural rhythms in areas linked to empathy, such as those that process facial expressions and emotional tone, begin to mirror those of the other person. This is sometimes called coupling. Think of it as two nervous systems stepping into the same emotional space. This alignment makes it easier to predict needs, reduce conflict, and offer comfort. It also explains why agreeable people can feel drained after spending time in tense or angry environments. Their minds don't just observe distress, they partially absorb it. The gift of agreeableness is connection and peacekeeping. The cost is sometimes emotional exhaustion. Underneath it all is a nervous system that keeps saying, "I want us to be okay." Your handwriting may reveal small clues about your temperament. Handwriting is a form of motor behavior. It's muscle plus nervous system plus habit frozen on a page. While graphology in the sense of fortune-telling isn't generally supported by science, some subtle connections between writing style and temperament do appear repeatedly. People who write with heavy pressure sometimes score higher on traits like intensity and urgency, as if their emotional signals move forcefully into their hands. People with small, tight, controlled letters often show caution, inhibition, or careful attention to detail, while very open, rounded, loose writing can be weakly correlated with sociability and spontaneity. Even slant matters. A forward slant can imply approach, engagement, or eagerness. A backward slant can signal reserve. None of this is definitive, but it's a reminder that the brain is physical. Thoughts don't just exist as abstract ideas, they travel into our shoulders, wrists, and fingertips. Every loop and curve is a physical echo of how you manage your energy and emotions. Personality can shift after brain injury or stroke. When the brain is injured, it can alter not only memory and movement, but also the patterns that make someone feel like themselves. A calm, steady person can become impulsive and blunt. A social and expressive person can become quiet and withdrawn. Sometimes the opposite happens, and someone who used to be afraid of risk becomes bold, outspoken, and decisive. Damage to areas such as the frontal lobes can weaken inhibition and self-monitoring, which changes how the person expresses anger, desire, or sadness. This can be painful for loved ones who may feel like they're talking to the same body, but not the same person. Yet there is another side to the story. The brain is adaptable. Over time, new pathways can form. and aspects of the old personality can return or reassemble themselves into something subtly new. The self isn't a statue, it's a dynamic pattern that can break, heal, and reconfigure. Musical preferences correlate with personality patterns across cultures. Music is emotion made audible. Fast, high-energy music with a heavy beat tends to appeal more to people who score high in extroversion and sensation-seeking. Slow, introspective, lyrically complex music speaks more to introverted and reflective listeners. People high in openness are drawn to unusual harmonies, experimental structures, or new genres that most people haven't heard yet. Conscientious people often like music that is orderly, polished, and predictable. What's remarkable is that these links appear not only within a single country or language, but consistently across different cultural backgrounds. Personality expresses itself in what feels good to the nervous system, and music is nutrition for the nervous system. The songs you turn to when you're tired or overwhelmed aren't random, they're regulatory. They're how your emotional circuitry reminds itself what safety feels like. Even your walk can signal traits like dominance or openness. Before you even speak, other people are forming impressions of you. Posture, stride length, head position, shoulder looseness, pace, rhythm, and how much space you occupy with your movement all provide clues. People who move with long strides, lifted chests, and steady forward gazes are often seen as confident, dominant, even intimidating. People who walk with a relaxed sway, softer shoulders, and a more fluid pace are often seen as approachable, creative, or open-minded. Fast, jerky walking with tension in the neck can be interpreted as anxious, stressed, or impatient. These impressions aren't always accurate, of course, but the human brain is designed to assess threat and trustworthiness almost instantly. Your gait communicates your state and your intentions. Long before language developed, bodies were already communicating. You send signals everywhere you go, in every hallway and on every sidewalk, simply by how you carry yourself. The pitch of your voice may unconsciously communicate confidence. Voice is a physical event. Air leaves your lungs, passes over vibrating vocal folds in your throat, resonates through your chest and head, and emerges, shaped by your tongue and lips. When someone is calm and certain, the muscles in their throat tend to stay relaxed. This often produces a slightly deeper, steadier tone that listeners interpret as grounded, even if the speaker isn't actually more knowledgeable. When someone is anxious, tiny muscles tense, airflow changes, and the pitch rises. Listeners interpret that tension often unfairly as insecurity. This response is fast and subconscious. People also subtly mirror one another, dropping or raising their own pitch in conversation to try to match social energy. In that way, confidence is sometimes less about what you say and more about how you sound. Your nervous system is constantly listening beneath the words, searching for safety and authority in the voice. Certain smells can make people appear more trustworthy. Scent travels directly into brain regions that process emotion and memory, bypassing the slower, more logical filters. Natural human body odor carries subtle chemical signals related to stress hormones and immune system markers. When someone is calm, healthy, and low in stress, those chemical traces can create a sense of safety and familiarity in others. Certain neutral, clean, or warm scents can also increase perceived trustworthiness during first encounters, even before a word is spoken. This plays a role in social bonding, in initial attraction, and even in cooperation. We tend to feel more comfortable with people whose scent subtly signals stability. This process doesn't feel mystical when you understand what the brain is doing. It's scanning for biological clues, asking a simple question, "Am I safe with you?" Long before you consciously decide whether you like someone, your nose has already made a judgment. The duration of eye contact influences how assertive someone seems. Eye contact is a biological negotiation. If you hold someone's gaze too briefly, you can seem nervous, submissive, or disengaged. If you hold it for too long, you can appear challenging, intense, or even aggressive. In the middle lies a range that feels confident and respectful. Brains react strongly during eye contact. Heart rate can change, pupils can dilate, and both reward and threat circuits can activate simultaneously, which is why it can feel both thrilling and stressful. Cultural background matters, as different cultures assign different meanings to direct gaze. But the underlying biology is incredibly deep-seated. We are social primates, and among primates, the eyes are a source of significant social information. People who manage eye contact with calm timing are often judged as self-assured, capable, even leader-like, without ever having to say those words aloud. The eyes tell others whether you believe you belong in the room. Micro-expressions can reveal genuine emotion faster than thought. A micro-expression is a tiny, involuntary flicker of facial muscle activity that appears and vanishes in less time than it takes to blink. These flashes can betray anger, contempt, surprise, fear, or joy. Even when a person is trying to hide their reactions, the brain initiates the emotional response before conscious control can step in to smooth it over or censor it. That means you sometimes see what someone truly felt for a split second before they decide what to show you. People who are very empathetic or socially observant become skilled at picking up on these fleeting cues. Law enforcement and clinical psychologists sometimes train to notice them, but in reality, most people already read them at a gut level. It's the moment when you just sense that someone isn't okay, even if they say, "I'm fine." Don't worry, their face already told you the truth. Your choice of words reflects deep personality dimensions. Language is more than just what we say, it's how we shape thoughts into sounds. Extroverted people use more social words, more excitement words, and more energy words. Introverted people often use language that is more precise, more introspective, and more focused on sensory details. Highly agreeable people tend to use words of care and warmth, while highly analytical people lean towards words of structure, logic, and control. Even function words, small bridge words like and, or, but, or because, can suggest how someone organizes their experiences in their head. These patterns appear in texts, emails, and casual conversations, and they tend to remain consistent over time because they reflect stable habits of attention. The mind focuses on what matters to it, and then the mouth follows. In that way, every sentence is a small behavioral fingerprint. You can't help but reveal how you think. People can sometimes predict traits accurately just by seeing your face. Humans are quick, almost shockingly quick, at forming first impressions. Within moments of seeing a face, people tend to make guesses about warmth, dominance, openness, and even honesty. These guesses aren't perfect, and they can be biased or unfair, but they're surprisingly consistent across different individuals. Some of this comes from reading subtle tension in facial muscles, posture, and expression. Some of it comes from subtle cues related to hormone exposure during development, which can leave traces in jawline shape, eye spacing, and brow structure. The brain evolved to make snap judgments because, in evolutionary terms, choosing whom to trust was a matter of survival. What's fascinating is that even today, employers, jurors, and potential romantic partners all respond to these instant impressions. Your face isn't just an appearance, it's treated by other nervous systems as early data about how to approach you. The left and right sides of your face can show different emotions. The two halves of the brain don't express emotion in exactly the same way, and each half primarily controls the opposite side of the face. This results in a subtle asymmetry in emotional expression. For many, the left side of the face displays slightly stronger, genuine feelings, particularly sadness or tenderness, because it's more directly influenced by the right hemisphere, which is heavily involved in processing emotions. Throughout history, portrait painters, especially those working in classical and Renaissance styles, often posed their subjects with the left cheek angled toward the viewer. They did this without consciously understanding the neuroscience behind it, but because that angle felt more soulful, revealing, and human. You can even test this yourself by covering one half of a photographed face and then the other. You'll often find that they feel like two slightly different people. We don't wear one single expression, but rather two parallel versions of our inner life at once. Animals can detect aspects of human personality through scent and tone. Many animals, particularly dogs, are astonishingly sensitive to chemical and vocal signals that humans barely notice. Dogs can distinguish, by scent alone, between sweat collected during calm states and sweat collected during anxious states, and they adjust their own behavior accordingly. They also respond differently to voices that have a relaxed, confident rhythm compared to voices that convey agitation or fear. Horses too respond to human body tension and vocal energy, sometimes mirroring stress or settling down when a human does. This means your personality isn't just something people experience, it's something other species can read. The animal is constantly listening to the music of your nervous system. If you are kind, gentle, patient, and non-threatening, many animals will approach you more willingly, not because of magic, but because their survival instincts tell them that your presence regulates their world instead of disrupting it. Digital avatars often reflect our real personalities more than we realize. When people create online characters or profiles, they often think they are inventing a new self. What quietly happens instead is projection. Introverted people are more likely to design avatars that closely resemble their real appearance or that present honesty and approachability. Extroverted people experiment more with stylization, dramatic color, and bold clothing or posture choices that signal charisma, confidence, and attention-seeking. People who feel powerful tend to choose taller or sharper-looking avatars. People who feel vulnerable often choose softer shapes, gentler eyes, and warmer palettes. Even the posture of a virtual character, whether open and expansive or closed and guarded, correlates with real-world self-esteem. In other words, the avatar becomes a mood map. It's not random decoration. It's an X-ray of identity as the person wishes to feel or believes they truly are behind the shyness of daily life. Online behavior patterns can predict personality better than friends can. What you like, what you repost, how often you comment, which topics hold your attention, and how you use language on the internet all leave a trace. This trace can be analyzed by algorithms to estimate broad personality traits such as openness, extroversion, agreeableness, and emotional stability. In some studies, these predictions matched self-report questionnaires more closely than the guesses made by co-workers or casual friends. That sounds unsettling, but it makes sense. Algorithms aren't distracted by surface charm, they're tracking repetition. Personality shows itself most clearly in what you choose again and again and again. Over time, your digital life becomes a behavioral mirror. It reflects not who you said you were in a formal setting, but how you actually behave when you're relaxed and unfiltered. What feels casual to you is, to a pattern-seeking system, a map of your psychological signature. Even the way you use emojis says something about your character. Emojis began as tiny decorations for text, but they've grown into emotional stand-ins for tone of voice, body language, and facial expression. People high in agreeableness tend to use warm, affiliative emojis, such as smiling faces or hearts, because they want to maintain harmony and reassure others that the message is friendly. People high in openness tend to use weirder or more playful emojis and sometimes combine them in creative ways to invent new shades of meaning. People high in conscientiousness often use emojis more sparingly, choosing clarity over flourish. Even frequency matters. Heavy use in professional spaces can signal comfort with informality, which often overlaps with extroversion and social boldness. In that sense, you're not just typing feelings, you're broadcasting how you relate to others, how you soften edges, how you invite closeness, and how you manage emotional distance in digital space. Personality shapes how time feels to you. For some people, a single hour feels long enough to hold a memory, while for others entire days slip by, as if time has softened its edges. Personality quietly alters this rhythm. Conscientious people tend to experience time as structured and measurable, dividing it into careful portions that fit their plans. Open and imaginative minds experience time more fluidly, as though moments melt together in creative flow. Those with higher levels of anxiety may feel each second stretch endlessly, while calm temperaments let time glide by unnoticed. Scientists studying temporal perception find that attention, emotion, and self-awareness all bend time's texture. When you're alert and focused, moments expand. When absorbed or joyful, they vanish. Personality sets the internal tempo that defines the pace of a lifetime. It's not the clock that moves faster or slower, it's the mind's pulse that changes its song. Risk-takers perceive time as moving faster. Adventurous personalities often feel that life speeds past in bright, quick flashes. When risk-takers face challenge or novelty, Their bodies release adrenaline and dopamine, sharpening focus, but shortening the feeling of duration. This is because intense stimulation floods working memory with information, compressing the sense of how long an event lasts. The result is a life that feels thrilling but fleeting. These individuals are drawn to experiences that stretch emotion and ignite attention. They don't linger in hesitation. They dive into immediacy. By contrast, cautious minds stretch moments out through anticipation and analysis. The difference isn't just psychological, but physiological, rooted in arousal and neural rhythm. Risk-takers live in fast forward, not because they hurry, but because excitement collapses the space between moments. Their reward is vividness, a sense that every second burns brighter, even if it passes in a blur. Conscientious people tend to plan further into the future. Some personalities naturally look ahead, as though their thoughts lean toward the horizon. Conscientious people organize time like gardeners preparing soil months before the first bloom. Their prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain that manages goals and delayed rewards, stays more active during decisions about the future. This creates a sense of structure and reliability, but also the weight of constant awareness. They picture outcomes before they happen, balancing duty against desire. For them, discipline isn't punishment, it's comfort. By planning, they soothe uncertainty. This ability to imagine steps before they're taken makes them effective at leadership, study, and perseverance. Yet, even in their precision, lies humanity. When plans shift, they adapt with quiet determination. Conscientiousness may make time feel linear and purposeful, but beneath it is a soft rhythm of care guiding choices toward meaning rather than mere success. Neurotic people experience more mental time travel into the past. For those whose emotions run deep and changeable, time isn't a straight path forward, but a loop that bends backward. People high in neuroticism often revisit memories, reliving them in vivid sensory detail. The emotional centers of their brains remain active during recall, so old experiences feel fresh, almost present. This tendency evolved as a way to anticipate danger, yet it can trap the mind in replay. Each remembered failure or loss becomes a rehearsal for future safety. But within that same sensitivity lies empathy and insight. Those who think often about the past tend to understand others with unusual depth, because they are practiced in examining feeling. Their minds are both mirror and echo, reflecting what was while shaping what will be. With awareness, their introspection becomes wisdom, turning regret into reflection and memory into meaning. Extroverts estimate durations more optimistically. For people who thrive on energy and interaction, time often feels generous. Extroverts tend to underestimate how long tasks will take, believing there will always be space for more. Their brains, rich in dopamine activity, tilt toward anticipation and reward. The excitement of what might happen overshadows concern for limits. This optimism fuels enthusiasm and social engagement, keeping life full of movement. When they say just a minute, it often becomes 10, because joy stretches their sense of capacity. Introverts, who experience events with deeper processing and awareness, tend to measure time more accurately. Extroverts, though, benefit from their flexible perception. It allows them to take risks, to leap, and to fill life with stories. For them, the clock is a companion, not a constraint. The hours seem shorter because each one shines so brightly before it slips away. The way you remember your past reflects your personality. Memory is a mosaic made by emotion. Optimistic minds arrange their pieces into patterns of triumph, transforming hardships into lessons and perseverance into pride. Pessimistic or cautious personalities recall more of the difficulties, using them as guides for self-protection. Highly agreeable people hold on to moments of kindness and connection, while ambitious minds focus on goals achieved or missed. The result isn't a record, but a narrative shaped by temperament. Every act of remembering is a form of storytelling where your personality chooses what details deserve light and which fade into shadow. Scientists find that emotional bias during recall helps maintain a coherent sense of identity. The memories you cherish are reflections of the values you live by. The past itself doesn't change, but the way you hold it determines whether it becomes a weight, a teacher, or a spark of inspiration. Some people literally imagine the future more vividly than others. When asked to picture a future moment, some minds see every detail: light, color, even the imagined sound of footsteps. Others glimpse only faint outlines. This difference comes from how brain networks for imagination and memory communicate. People high in openness and conscientiousness show stronger connections between the hippocampus, which stores past experiences, and the visual cortex, which paints new ones. They borrow fragments of memory to build future scenes, almost as if rehearsing reality. Those who imagine vividly often plan more effectively and feel stronger motivation, because their minds experience goals as already half real. Yet vivid imagination can also amplify worry when those future visions turn dark. The same neural gift that fuels creativity can nurture anxiety. In every mind, imagination is both a map and a mirror, revealing not just what we hope to see, but how we see ourselves becoming. Optimists recall fewer failures, even when reminded of them. Ask an optimistic person about a setback, and they might smile as if it belonged to someone else. Their brains, particularly regions that regulate emotion, dampen the sting of negative memories. This selective recall helps maintain resilience and hope. It isn't denial, but adaptation. By focusing on progress rather than pain, they keep motivation alive. Pessimists, on the other hand, remember errors more vividly, treating each as a cautionary tale. While this helps them prepare for future difficulties, it can also weigh them down. Optimists prune their memories like gardeners, letting wilted moments fade to make room for new growth. Over time, this bias toward positive recall shapes mood, confidence, and even health. The world they inhabit is no brighter than anyone else's, but their minds paint it with lighter tones, remembering the sunrise more than the storm. Pessimists focus on possible dangers, even in safe environments. The human brain evolved to detect threat before pleasure, and in some people, that vigilance never turns off. Those with more pessimistic tendencies experience heightened activity in the amygdala, which stays alert to potential loss or risk. They imagine obstacles long before they appear, rehearsing solutions to problems that may never come. This constant scanning can make the world feel uncertain, yet it also provides foresight and caution. Many engineers, planners, and safety experts thrive because of this precise awareness. However, if left unchecked, it narrows the field of perception until opportunity looks like danger too. Training the mind to notice safety, beauty, and kindness restores balance. Then vigilance becomes discernment, and caution turns into wisdom. The pessimistic mind doesn't seek misery. It seeks control in a world that often refuses to be controlled. Your sense of self-continuity links directly to your personality stability. Imagine your life as a book written chapter by chapter. For some people, the story feels seamless. For others, it reads like a series of unrelated tales. This feeling of connectedness through time is called self-continuity, and it depends partly on personality. Emotionally stable individuals tend to maintain a strong thread of identity, using memory to integrate the past into present goals. Those high in openness or neuroticism may feel themselves change more drastically from one year to the next. Scientists find that this difference involves the medial prefrontal cortex, which binds memories to the sense of self. When that connection is steady, personality feels grounded. When it shifts, life becomes an ongoing act of reinvention. Both states are beautiful. One offers calm, the other renewal. The self, after all, isn't fixed. It's a river that remembers its source even as it keeps flowing. Personality influences how strongly you feel emotions. Not all hearts beat with the same intensity. Extroverts often experience joy and excitement with greater force, their reward circuits glowing like lanterns in the dark. People high in neuroticism feel pain and worry more sharply, their amygdala holding on to emotion longer. Agreeable individuals absorb others' feelings, sensing happiness and sorrow as if through shared skin. Conscientious people modulate emotion with thought, calming themselves through control and perspective. These differences ensure diversity in how humanity reacts to life. Some people carry sunlight, others carry shelter. Together, they create balance. The strength of feeling is neither gift nor flaw. It's texture. Emotion moves through each personality like a unique melody, composed by the structure of the mind, but performed through experience. In every face, emotion's music plays differently, reminding us that even in a single moment, the human heart holds infinite variety. Extroverts show stronger reactions to rewards. When opportunity glimmers, extroverted minds light up before it even arrives. Their dopamine systems respond eagerly to novelty and anticipation, making social experiences and challenges feel invigorating. This neural sensitivity drives them to explore, to reach out, and to act quickly on curiosity. The world rewards their enthusiasm with connection and discovery. Introverts feel reward too, but their satisfaction often comes later in reflection or mastery. Extroverts living at a faster tempo chase possibilities with bright confidence. This optimism can lead to overcommitment or risk, yet it also propels progress and social cohesion. Each time an extrovert celebrates or shares excitement, the energy spreads, lifting those around them. Their joy is contagious, and evolution seems to favor that light. The reward itself matters less than the sparkle of pursuit, the way they make living look like celebration. Neuroticism amplifies threat perception in the amygdala. Within the brain, the amygdala is the guardian of safety, sounding the alarm at any sign of risk. For people high in neuroticism, this guardian rarely rests. It fires more frequently and with greater intensity, coloring perception with anxiety and caution. A brief silence in conversation may feel like rejection, or a harmless glance may appear as judgment. The same system that once protected early humans from danger now magnifies uncertainty in modern life. Yet this sensitivity also grants remarkable intuition. These individuals detect mood shifts, social cues, and subtle inconsistencies long before others notice. Through therapy, mindfulness, or self-awareness, the amygdala's alarm can be softened, transforming fear into attentiveness. What seems like fragility is often heightened perception. The neurotic brain sees the world with vivid alertness, and when guided with care, that awareness becomes wisdom rather than worry. Agreeable people process empathy through distinct brain circuits. The brain's mirror systems activate when we see another person in pain or joy, but in highly agreeable individuals, these circuits fire more intensely. Their anterior insular and anterior cingulate cortex, regions responsible for emotional resonance, engage as if the feelings of others were their own. This deep empathy helps them build trust, harmony, and forgiveness, making them natural healers in social settings. However, it also leaves them vulnerable to exhaustion, since constant resonance can drain emotional energy. Their kindness isn't simply moral, it's biological. It comes from the way their brains blend perception and compassion into one seamless response. This sensitivity has shaped human cooperation across generations. Without such wiring, empathy might be an idea instead of an instinct. Agreeable people remind us that understanding another's feeling isn't learned. It's felt directly and deeply. Creative individuals have more crosstalk between emotional and cognitive regions. In creative minds, the boundaries between feeling and thought are thinner. The limbic system, which generates emotion, communicates more freely with the prefrontal cortex, where planning and reasoning occur. This neural crosstalk allows imagination to translate emotion into structure. Music, writing, invention, art. Creativity thrives on this union of impulse and order. Emotional charge fuels originality, while cognition gives it direction. Such brains tolerate ambiguity longer than most, holding chaos without panic until patterns appear. This flexibility produces ideas that seem spontaneous, yet precise. Scientists suggest that this connectivity also explains why many creative individuals feel deeply and sometimes struggle with mood swings. The same pathway that brings inspiration also intensifies experience. Creativity, then, is the brain's way of transforming emotion into design, turning the private language of feeling into something that others can see, hear, and understand. High openness is linked to richer sensory experiences. Open-minded individuals often describe the world as brighter, louder, or more textured than others perceive it. Their sensory and association regions communicate more strongly, allowing perception to blend with imagination. A piece of music may shimmer with color. A scent may evoke entire landscapes. This sensitivity nurtures creativity and wonder, but it also leaves them more exposed to overstimulation. The same brain that notices beauty in a ripple of light can also be overwhelmed by noise or confusion. This vividness is both gift and challenge, a heightened awareness of the richness of existence. For these individuals, reality is never flat or ordinary. Every sound, every shade, every breath becomes part of a living symphony. But the rest of us may only half hear. The world doesn't change for them. They simply feel it more fully, as though life itself hums closer to the skin. People with low openness may filter out subtle sensations. Not every mind seeks novelty. Those lower in openness value stability, clarity, and control. Their brains act like filters, tuning out minor distractions to maintain focus on the familiar. This efficiency supports dependability and comfort. Predictability is soothing to them. It anchors their sense of security. In a rapidly changing world, these individuals provide the steadiness that progress often forgets it needs. Their filtered perception doesn't mean they're less perceptive. It means they direct their attention toward what they already trust. This focus allows mastery through repetition, excellence through precision, and wisdom through consistency. While others chase surprise, they preserve balance. In the ecosystem of human nature, they're the roots that hold the soil steady while the winds of novelty pass overhead. Their calm refusal to be swept away keeps civilization grounded in the known. Some personalities experience awe more easily. Awe arises when the self meets something larger, whether the curve of a galaxy or the quiet perfection of a single leaf. People high in openness, humility, and curiosity tend to feel this emotion more readily. Their brains show lower activity in self-centered regions and higher in sensory ones, allowing them to dissolve briefly into the vastness they perceive. Regular experiences of awe reduce stress, foster connection, and encourage altruism. These individuals don't need grandeur to be moved. Even a shift of light or a sudden silence can awaken wonder. This sensitivity acts as a spiritual reflex, reminding the mind that it belongs to something immense and mysterious. Awe isn't escape, but expansion. It teaches humility without words. In a world that often races forward, those who pause in awe are the ones who remember how infinite a moment can be. The capacity for wonder correlates with mental flexibility. People who still marvel at rainbows, ideas, and coincidences tend to have flexible minds that adapt easily to change. Wonder arises when curiosity overcomes fear. The brain releases dopamine during these moments, encouraging exploration and learning. Individuals high in cognitive flexibility allow this openness to thrive, shifting between logic and imagination with ease. They can hold uncertainty without frustration, which makes them more creative and resilient. This connection between wonder and adaptability means that amazement isn't naive, it's a sign of mental strength. The ability to say, "I do not know," and still feel joy is one of the highest human capacities. Those who keep their sense of wonder live in a world that never stops unfolding. Their curiosity turns the unknown into an invitation rather than a threat. Wonder is the mind's quiet proof that growth is still possible. A sense of humor reveals more about your psyche than you think. Laughter is a mirror held up to thought. The kind of humor a person enjoys reflects the way their mind organizes surprise, tension, and truth. Those who love wordplay tend to process information quickly, delighting in incongruity. People drawn to gentle humor often possess high empathy, preferring jokes that unite rather than divide. Dark humor correlates with emotional stability, allowing people to confront pain with irony rather than fear. Every laugh is a release of energy once spent managing contradiction. It signals cognitive agility and emotional health. Humor binds groups, softens hierarchy, and builds resilience. The joke itself matters less than the spark it reveals. The mind is ability to dance with discomfort. When someone laughs easily, it isn't a sign of shallowness but of adaptability. To laugh is to survive the absurdity of being human with grace, intelligence, and light. Dark humor appreciation correlates with intelligence and low aggression. People who enjoy dark humor are often more emotionally resilient and cognitively flexible than they appear. To find amusement in something grim, the brain must juggle irony, empathy, and logic all at once. It's a form of emotional multitasking that calls for sharp reasoning and a secure sense of safety. Studies show that those who appreciate morbid or taboo jokes tend to score higher on verbal intelligence and exhibit lower aggression. Their laughter isn't cruelty but distance, a way to look at what frightens humanity and turn it into manageable absurdity. The mind reframes terror as pattern, tragedy as puzzle. This act releases tension rather than feeding hostility. Dark humor may not soften the world, but it gives the mind a tool to face what can't be changed and still whisper, "I understand the darkness, and I'm still here to laugh." Sarcasm activates complex reasoning regions in the brain. Sarcasm requires a mind nimble enough to recognize contradiction and context simultaneously. When someone uses a sarcastic tone, listeners must detect the literal statement, identify the mismatch between words and intention, and infer the hidden meaning beneath. Neuroimaging reveals that this mental dance activates parts of the prefrontal cortex responsible for perspective-taking and social reasoning. It also engages the temporal lobes, which decode tone and nuance. In other words, sarcasm is a linguistic workout. It strengthens. The bridge between logic and empathy makes them work in tandem. Sarcasm requires more than just a strong vocabulary. It also depends on emotional intelligence and impeccable timing. A perfectly delivered sarcastic comment implies, "I'm aware that you understand I don't literally mean what I'm saying." It's a flash of shared understanding, a subtle test of intelligence and social connection masked as light-hearted fun. People who are quick to laugh tend to forge stronger social connections. Laughter stands as one of humanity's oldest forms of communication. Long before the development of structured language, our ancestors used laughter as a signal of safety, belonging, and willingness to cooperate. Modern research indicates that frequent, genuine laughter stimulates the release of oxytocin, a hormone known for deepening trust. People who laugh freely invite others into a gentle physiological harmony, synchronizing breath and heart rate, lowering cortisol levels, and reducing the perception of threat. A single shared laugh can transform strangers into allies, even if just for a fleeting moment. Those who can find humor in the everyday aspects of life are generally seen as more approachable, more forgiving, and more resilient. Their laughter becomes a social magnet, drawing others closer. These bonds, created through shared laughter, often endure because they're based on calm joy rather than constant excitement. To laugh easily isn't about taking life lightly, but about reminding everyone around you that connection can start with a sound, not necessarily words. Personality dictates whether stress fuels or depletes you. When under pressure, some people experience a surge of energy, while others simply crumble. This difference often stems from a person's fundamental temperament and how they interpret the stressor. Individuals with high emotional stability tend to view stress as a challenge, activating adrenaline in a focused and constructive manner. Conversely, those prone to neuroticism interpret stress as a threat, triggering hormonal responses that deplete and destabilize them. It's essentially the same biochemical cascade, but it's filtered through different cognitive lenses. Optimists gain momentum from difficulties, while worriers lose their energy reserves trying to anticipate potential problems. These reactions aren't moral strengths or weaknesses, but rather survival mechanisms shaped by early environments and inherited nervous system predispositions. Over time, practices like mindfulness, adequate rest, and supportive relationships can alter this reaction pattern, teaching even highly sensitive individuals to channel stress into clarity instead of succumbing to collapse. Whether pressure results in energy or exhaustion depends not only on the event itself, but also on the individual's internal interpretation of it. Optimists tend to recover more quickly from emotional setbacks. Optimism functions as an emotional shock absorber. When disappointment occurs, optimists perceive the pain as temporary and specific, rather than permanent and pervasive. Their inner dialogue goes something like, "This is just a moment, not a life sentence." This mindset has significant biological consequences, reducing the duration of stress hormones and aiding the immune system in bouncing back. Optimists naturally adopt coping mechanisms sooner, seeking social interaction, humor, or creative distractions. They allow themselves to envision more positive outcomes, and this vision translates into behavioral momentum. Even their brain activity mirrors this pattern, with brain scans revealing a faster return to baseline in areas associated with negative emotions. Over the years, this becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. Each successful recovery reinforces the mind's belief that healing is possible, further building resilience. Optimism isn't about naively denying hardship. It's about having a learned confidence that suffering is temporary and that the self that emerges afterward may even be stronger. Chronic pessimism can subtly shorten one's lifespan. A consistently negative worldview quietly takes a toll on the body. When the brain constantly anticipates threat, it keeps the stress response slightly activated. Cortisol levels remain elevated, heart rate recovery slows, and inflammation increases. These subtle physiological effects accumulate over time. Pessimists often suffer from disrupted sleep, heightened anxiety, and a decreased motivation to engage in healthy behaviors. However, this isn't solely about one's outlook, it's about being in a constant state of vigilance. The mind believes it must always be prepared for harm, and the body responds accordingly. Over time, this perpetual state of readiness erodes the systems designed for repair. Interestingly, moderate realism can protect against both extremes. Balanced thinkers acknowledge risks without succumbing to them, allowing the body to rest between periods of stress. Pessimism might feel like caution, but biologically, it becomes a slow form of wear and tear. Hope isn't just a comfort. It's essential for maintaining the body's machinery. Extroverts tend to underestimate risks and overestimate their level of control. Extroverted individuals often feel more capable of influencing outcomes than they actually are. Their brains release stronger dopamine signals when confronted with new or uncertain situations, making novelty feel rewarding instead of frightening. This biochemical response encourages exploration and leadership, but can also lead to an underestimation of potential dangers. Extroverts may assume that charm or determination can overcome limitations, leading them to take bolder chances. Their optimism attracts others, creating a sense of energy and collaboration that can sometimes compensate for their risk blindness. However, the same confidence that drives groups forward can expose them to mistakes if it's not tempered by more cautious perspectives. The world progresses through this balance of boldness and restraint. Extroverts provide the initial spark, while reflective minds provide the necessary map. When these two forces respect each other, progress occurs without catastrophic failures. Confidence is a valuable asset when it's paired with listening. It only becomes hubris when it forgets to consider potential pitfalls. Conscientious people tend to live longer than impulsive ones. Long-term studies consistently demonstrate that conscientiousness is a strong predictor of lifespan. This trait encompasses reliability, self-discipline, and attention to detail, which translate directly into healthier habits. Conscientious individuals generally avoid risky shortcuts, adhere to medical advice, and maintain consistent sleep and nutrition schedules. They're also less likely to develop addictions or engage in reckless behaviors. The cumulative effect of these small, sensible choices is significant. Their bodies experience fewer extreme stress episodes, fewer accidents, and improved recovery from illnesses. Impulsive individuals, while often creative and daring, may push boundaries in ways that wear down the body. It's not about moral virtue, but about how energy is managed. The methodical plumber conserves resources, while the thrill-seeker spends them rapidly. Evolution likely preserved both types because society requires both caution and courage to maintain balance. Longevity often favors the cautious, but history frequently remembers the bold. Each serves a purpose in life, albeit at different paces. Impulsivity is partly heritable and partly influenced by the environment. Impulsivity has roots in biology. Some people inherit neural circuits that trigger reward signals quickly and inhibit them slowly. Their dopamine systems activate rapidly, prompting action before thorough consideration. However, genes don't determine destiny. The environment shapes how that impulsivity manifests. In supportive, structured settings, it can evolve into creativity, spontaneity, and courage. In chaotic or neglectful environments, it can lead to self-destructive behaviors or risk-seeking tendencies. Childhood discipline, safety, and positive role models teach the impulsive mind how to pause without stifling its inherent spark. Scientists refer to this dynamic interaction as gene-environment interplay. It's a continuous dialogue between inherited predispositions and lived experiences. The same trait that makes one person reckless could make another a brilliant improviser. What matters is guidance, not suppression. Impulsivity is energy in motion. With patience, that energy can transform into innovation rather than destruction, movement rather than chaos. Personality is a predictor of both financial habits and career satisfaction. Money and work reflect temperament as much as they reflect skill. Conscientious individuals often budget carefully, track details, and plan for the long term. They derive comfort from order and delayed gratification. Extroverts are drawn to roles that involve social interaction, teamwork, or leadership, while introverts thrive in analytical or creative solitude. People with high levels of openness may prioritize investing in ideas over stability, choosing education, travel, or art over financial security. Agreeable personalities often prioritize harmony, sometimes at the expense of assertive negotiation. Each orientation carries its own strengths and vulnerabilities. Success blossoms when a person's occupation aligns with their personality rather than conflicting with it. Someone who needs autonomy will struggle in a micromanaged environment, while someone who craves structure will find chaos overwhelming. Fulfillment arises when your daily work matches your inherent temperament. The paycheck is less important than the fit between your tasks and your disposition. Career satisfaction isn't about reaching the highest position, but about finding a place where you can breathe easily. Leaders tend to exhibit high levels of extroversion and low levels of neuroticism. People naturally follow those who radiate confidence and calm. High extroversion fosters visible enthusiasm, while low neuroticism allows for composure under pressure. These qualities combine to project stability, fostering trust. However, leadership isn't simply about being loud or stoic. It's about social regulation. The leader's nervous system becomes a template for the group. If the leader is steady, others synchronize toward focus. If the leader falters, collective anxiety rises. This dynamic explains why extroverted, emotionally stable individuals often rise in hierarchies, even when they lack expertise. They signal safety, and safety is often perceived as competence. Still, effective leadership relies on empathy and adaptability as much as it relies on boldness. Some of history's most transformative figures were introverted visionaries who led through insight, not volume. In truth, leadership isn't about personality type, but about timing. The moment dictates whether the world needs a fiery voice or a calming whisper. Creativity flourishes in people with high levels of openness and low levels of conformity. Open minds delight in novelty. They're willing to venture into ambiguity and return with unusual treasures. When combined with low conformity, this openness fuels creative fire. Such individuals are less constrained by rules, more comfortable with risk, and better able to integrate seemingly contradictory ideas. They find inspiration in chaos, where others see only confusion. Neuroscientists have found that highly open people exhibit more cross-communication between brain networks responsible for imagination and logical control, facilitating the formation of unusual associations. Low conformity ensures that these associations are expressed rather than suppressed. Therefore, creativity isn't random, it's permission. It's the inner voice that says, "Try it anyway." Culture depends on this tension. Without openness, society stagnates. Without conformity, it unravels. True creativity exists between the two, breaking form just enough to let light in without burning the entire structure down. Empaths automatically mirror the facial muscles of others. Empaths experience emotions almost as if they were contagious. When they observe someone's expression, subtle facial muscles activate in mimicry, often within a fraction of a second. This micro-imitation helps the brain understand what the other person is feeling by recreating it physically. It's an unconscious bridge between bodies. This process involves the insular and anterior cingulate cortex, regions that link sensation with emotion. Because empaths mirror so efficiently, they can offer profound comfort but also become easily exhausted. The influx of borrowed emotion requires recovery time that others may not need. Therefore, strong empathy can coexist with social fatigue. This serves as a reminder that compassion is physiological, not just moral. The empath doesn't merely imagine pain, they partially relive it. Their tenderness is rooted in biology, a nervous system attuned to echo the hearts around it. People high in agreeableness are more likely to forgive betrayal. Agreeable personalities value harmony and connection. When hurt, they often search for explanations before seeking revenge, assuming misunderstanding rather than malice. Their empathy systems activate strongly, making forgiveness feel more rewarding than resentment. This trait can preserve relationships through difficult times, allowing for reconciliation where others would sever ties. However, it can also expose them to repeated harm if they don't establish clear boundaries. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means releasing the desire to retaliate. For the agreeable person, this release happens quickly because conflict feels physically uncomfortable. Their nervous system calms only when peace is restored. The same tendency that nurtures friendship can also trap them in unbalanced relationships. True healing for them involves learning to forgive without sacrificing their safety, to maintain kindness without tolerating cruelty. Their gift is mercy, but even mercy requires a door that can be closed. Narcissism can sometimes mask fragile self-esteem. Beneath a narcissistic exterior, there often lies a fragile core. The boastful demeanor, constant self-reference, and insatiable need for admiration serve as defenses against deep-seated insecurity. For many, early experiences of neglect or conditional love taught them that their worth must be earned through outward displays. The exaggerated self becomes a suit of armor, polished to blind others and conceal the vulnerable interior. When admiration wanes, panic sets in because silence feels like erasure. Understanding this mechanism doesn't excuse manipulation, but it reveals the underlying motivation. Narcissistic individuals aren't simply full of themselves. They depend on others to maintain the illusion of solidity. Compassion toward this truth can help you set boundaries without resorting to hatred. You can acknowledge the wound beneath the arrogance while refusing to feed the performance. Beneath the glitter and the echoes, narcissism is a lonely attempt to be seen by a mirror that never truly reflects back love. Psychopathy and empathy exist on a shared neural spectrum. Empathy isn't a simple on or off switch. It has multiple components that can vary independently. Emotional empathy involves feeling what another person feels. Cognitive empathy involves understanding what another person feels. People with psychopathic traits often possess the latter without the former. They accurately read social cues but remain emotionally detached. Brain imaging reveals reduced activity in emotional processing areas such as the amygdala, but normal or even heightened activity in regions associated with reasoning about others' motives. This allows for strategic charm and manipulation. At the opposite extreme are individuals who feel the emotions of others too intensely, risking burnout. Between these extremes lies the broad normal range of human empathy, which can be adjusted through experience and conscious choices. This spectrum reminds us that morality doesn't rest on a single brain circuit. It depends on how understanding and feeling combine within the realm of conscience. Highly conscientious people experience guilt more intensely. For the highly conscientious individual, responsibility is sacred. When they fall short, even slightly, the internal alarm sounds loudly. The same neural circuitry that drives careful planning and reliability can also fuel harsh self-criticism. Physiological studies reveal heightened stress responses in such individuals when they're confronted with errors. Their brains replay the mistake as if they're re-editing a scene that can't be changed. The advantage is accountability. The disadvantage is exhaustion. Constant guilt can lead to perfectionism, insomnia, and emotional burnout. Yet their integrity is essential for the functioning of communities. They're the ones who notice forgotten details, who fulfill their promises, who can't rest until the work is done correctly. The world depends on them, even though they rarely extend equal compassion to themselves. Learning to forgive themselves is their final act of duty, the moment when conscience evolves into balance. Humility correlates with accurate self-perception. Humility is often misunderstood as weakness, but it's actually cognitive precision. Humble people perceive themselves with clarity rather than distortion. They acknowledge their strengths without exaggeration and their flaws without collapsing under their weight. Brain research indicates that they experience less defensive reactivity when corrected, allowing learning to occur more rapidly. This calm realism strengthens relationships because it eliminates the need for constant validation. Others feel safe around humble people because they create space for shared truth. Culturally, humility sustains cooperation, preventing dominance hierarchies from stifling empathy. On an individual level, it safeguards mental health by reducing the exhausting pursuit of superiority. True humility isn't about pretending to be less, it's about refusing to pretend to be more. It stabilizes one's identity like a compass that points to honesty, even amidst chaos. In that stillness, growth becomes easier because there's nothing left to prove. Confidence can be cultivated through repeated success experiences. Confidence isn't mysterious, it's a form of conditioning. Each time a person faces a challenge and succeeds, the brain stores that event as evidence of their capability. The more evidence accumulated, the stronger their self-belief becomes. This process occurs through reinforcement loops between the hippocampus, which records experiences, and the prefrontal cortex, which evaluates outcomes. Gradual exposure to manageable challenges builds lasting confidence more effectively than sudden leaps. Even small victories count, such as completing minor tasks or keeping promises to oneself over time. These accumulate into a quiet sense of certainty. Therefore, confidence isn't arrogance or a denial of fear. It's memory organized into courage. Anyone can cultivate it through repetition. When failure occurs, reframing it as information rather than judgment prevents the loop from breaking. Confidence thrives not in perfection, but in persistence that teaches the mind to trust its own resilience. Personality shifts slightly every 7 to 10 years. Longitudinal studies reveal that personality isn't static. Over roughly each decade, small yet measurable changes occur. Impulsivity tends to decrease, conscientiousness tends to increase, and emotional stability often improves. These gradual adjustments reflect learning, hormonal evolution, and adaptation to the environment. The brain's plasticity allows for new neural connections even in adulthood, influenced by habits, relationships, and recurring emotional patterns. Major life transitions such as career changes, losses, or parenthood can accelerate this process, prompting a re-evaluation of priorities. Personality doesn't vanish, it refines itself. The core melody remains recognizable, while the arrangement evolves. This continuous, subtle remodeling is why people often feel wiser or more compassionate with age. Change doesn't erase authenticity, it completes it. The self you're becoming isn't a betrayal of who you were. It's the accumulated echo of every season you've lived, singing forward through a mind that's still capable of growth. Adolescence is a critical period for shaping personality. During the teenage years, the brain undergoes one of the most dramatic remodeling phases of the entire lifespan. Neurons that are used are strengthened, while those that aren't are pruned back, meaning that experiences are physically carving individuality into the nervous system. Emotional centers mature rapidly, while areas responsible for long-term planning are still developing. This disparity explains why intensity and impulsivity feel so overwhelming at this stage. It's also why first love, friendship, embarrassment, and betrayal feel almost cosmically significant. The social world matters more than almost anything else because belonging teaches safety. Beliefs about trust, worth, power, and love are being formed at a cellular level. By the end of this period, the mind carries forward a style of responding to the world that can resonate softly or loudly for decades. Personality tends to stabilize around the age of 30. In early adulthood, the mind begins to settle into patterns that feel familiar and repeatable. Habits of thought and emotion start reinforcing themselves, creating a sense of inner continuity. The parts of the brain responsible for self-control, planning, and emotional regulation have now fully matured, helping reactions to become more measured and predictable. Preferences become clearer. Values begin to feel non-negotiable. The constant shifting scene of younger years gives way to something steadier, almost like a center of gravity forming. This is also the point in life when many people report feeling that they know what kind of life they can live peacefully and what kind of life will cost them too much. The self becomes less experimental and more intentional, guided not only by possibilities, but also by earned self-knowledge. Major life events like marriage or parenthood can shift personality traits. Profound commitments reach deep into the nervous system and rearrange priorities. When someone joins their life with another person or becomes responsible for a child, attention naturally moves outward. The brain begins rewarding care, cooperation, and protection. What once felt optional now feels sacred. People who take on these bonds often find themselves developing greater patience, reliability, and emotional steadiness, even if those qualities didn't come easily before. Their sense of identity stretches to include others. Time begins to be measured in shared milestones rather than individual impulses. The nervous system even tunes itself to notice signals of another person's needs with greater sensitivity. It's not that the old self disappears, it's that new rooms are built inside it, rooms made for duty, tenderness, and the long, slow practice of staying. Trauma can compress personality into survival-focused patterns. When the body has lived in fear for too long, the mind adapts by narrowing its focus to safety. Curiosity diminishes because curiosity can feel dangerous. Spontaneity fades because surprises haven't been kind. The emotional system becomes hypervigilant, scanning for threats even in calm environments. This isn't a sign of weakness. It's a survival response that allowed the person to endure what they shouldn't have had to endure. Over time, however, this protective narrowing can begin to feel like a cage. Interests shrink, trust becomes difficult, and life feels smaller than it once was. Healing is the slow and careful process of teaching the body that the story has changed. With time, support, and consistent safety, the mind remembers how to open again. Gentle moments of curiosity return, and so does softness. The self that was forced to fold back on itself can unfold, one moment at a time. Long-term therapy can measurably change personality traits. Ongoing therapeutic work is more than just conversation. It's neural training. Repeatedly noticing thoughts, naming feelings, and exploring reactions in a safe space teaches the nervous system to pause before it responds. Over many sessions, the regions of the brain involved in emotional regulation and self-awareness become more coordinated. People who once reacted out of fear begin to respond with reflection. People who once shut down begin to stay present. People who once felt brittle begin to feel flexible. These aren't illusions. They're measurable and lasting shifts in temperament. The mind learns that it isn't helpless within its own patterns, and that knowledge alone changes those patterns. Through this process, many people become calmer, kinder to themselves, more open with others, and less ruled by past pain. In this way, healing isn't just relief. Healing becomes identity work. Moving to a new culture can reshape openness and agreeableness. Entering an unfamiliar culture is like entering a different emotional climate. Social rules differ. What's polite in one place might be perceived as distant in another, and what's honest in one place might be considered rude in another. The mind is forced to adapt not only to language, but also to rhythm, pacing, humor, and expectations. This constant adaptation builds flexibility and broadens one's perspective. It also fosters a greater understanding of difference, as what once felt threatening now feels normal. Living in a culture that isn't one's own often encourages patience in communication, creativity in problem-solving, and humility in daily life. It becomes easier to see situations from another person's point of view because one has had to do so simply to navigate daily life. That repeated act of perspective-taking doesn't always fade upon returning home. It becomes an integral part of how the self navigates the world. Travel exposure tends to increase flexibility and curiosity. New environments stimulate the orienting systems of the brain. Unfamiliar architecture, unfamiliar foods, unfamiliar sounds, and unfamiliar gestures all send a message to the nervous system that says, "Pay attention." This heightened awareness awakens parts of the mind that routine can quietly numb. People who spend meaningful time in different places often learn to tolerate uncertainty and even to enjoy it. Patience grows because travel teaches that not everything will go according to plan and that this isn't the end of the world. Curiosity grows because every moment becomes an opportunity to learn. Over time, this repeated contact with unfamiliar experiences tends to soften rigid assumptions. There's less of a need to defend one way of living as the only correct way. Instead, there's a growing sense that the world is composed of many worlds, and that reality is much larger than what one initially knew. Aging often brings greater emotional stability and empathy. With time, emotional storms lose some of their intensity. The body becomes less reactive, and the mind becomes more patient. This isn't because feelings fade, it's because perspective deepens. After enough loss, enough healing, and enough unexpected changes, the nervous system begins to recognize that emotional states are temporary. Fear is temporary, anger is temporary, and grief is real, but it moves. This quiet understanding allows for a sense of gentleness to emerge toward oneself and toward others. Older adults often report being less easily provoked and more easily touched by others. Compassion flows more freely because life has revealed how fragile people truly are. The focus shifts from proving something to tending to something. Stability here isn't about a dulling of experience. It's a soft but powerful steadiness built from years of surviving what once felt unsurvivable. Most people grow more conscientious with age. Over the course of adulthood, daily responsibilities slowly sculpt the mind into reliability. Bills must be paid, promises must be kept, loved ones must be cared for, and work must be done, even when energy is low. Each of these demands becomes a form of training for attention and follow-through. The brain learns to plan, to anticipate, and to consider consequences. Impulses are still present, but they're less in charge. The rewards. The system itself begins to change. A growing sense of satisfaction, completeness, order, and stability emerges. What once felt restrictive now feels like being grounded. For many, this sense of order isn't about control for the sake of control. It's about safeguarding what truly matters. Over time, conscientiousness feels less like a chore and more like a heartfelt devotion. Neuroticism typically lessens later in life. Anxious thoughts don't vanish entirely, but their power diminishes. Repeated exposure to loss, uncertainty, and change teaches the mind it can endure intense emotions. The body gradually stops treating every uncertainty as an emergency. Stress hormones return to normal more quickly. The gap between trigger and response widens slightly. That space allows for choice. Many older adults report a greater ability to let trivial matters go without dwelling on them. They conserve their energy for what genuinely matters. There's also a subtle shift from dwelling on negative thoughts to acceptance. The mind slowly replaces the question, "What if everything falls apart?" with the gentler question, "Even if it does, will I still be here?" That recognition brings relief. The nervous system gains more self-trust. That trust feels like peace. Certain personality traits are better predictors of happiness than income. Long-term studies from various places suggest that emotional stability, optimism, and kindness are stronger indicators of life satisfaction than wealth once basic needs are met. People who can soothe their own distress, reframe disappointments, and connect warmly with others tend to report higher well-being, even without high status or luxurious surroundings. This doesn't imply money is meaningless. Comfort matters, safety matters. But beyond a certain point, temperament determines how experiences are interpreted. Two people can experience the exact same day, yet one remembers support, humor, and small joys, while the other remembers insults, exhaustion, and threats. The way the mind filters reality becomes the environment where happiness either thrives or withers. In that sense, well-being isn't just about what happens, it's also about who is inside to cope with what happens. Practicing gratitude can increase agreeableness over time. When a person regularly takes a moment to notice what they appreciate, their focus gradually shifts. Irritation and resentment aren't ignored, but they're no longer the only narrative. The nervous system becomes more accustomed to warmth. Feelings like tenderness and respect become easier to access over time. People who intentionally practice gratitude tend to become more patient in conversation, more forgiving after conflicts, and less quick to assume the worst in others. Biology reflects this change. Hormones linked to bonding increase. Stress responses return to normal more quickly. The result isn't fake cheerfulness. The result is an easier time extending understanding. The inner attitude shifts away from defensiveness and toward cooperation. What begins as a simple nightly habit becomes a genuine personality adjustment, making gentleness easier to offer and receive. High curiosity predicts lifelong learning. Curious minds see the unknown not as a threat, but as an opportunity. That attitude encourages constant engagement with new ideas, new people, and new skills throughout life. Curiosity activates reward pathways in the brain, providing a small burst of pleasure each time something is discovered or understood. This makes learning self-reinforcing. It also protects against stagnation. People who remain curious tend to adapt better because they're accustomed to updating their beliefs. They're also more resilient because they can turn hardship into a question and then turn that question into growth. Memory stays richer because new information constantly arrives. Empathy can even deepen because curiosity about the world so easily becomes curiosity about other human beings. The result is a personality that stays alert, flexible, playful, and alive, even in later years. A strong sense of purpose can buffer neurotic tendencies. Anxiety thrives in uncertainty without meaning. When a person feels guided by a purpose, even a small one, worry loses much of its power to dominate attention. Stressful events are no longer just discomfort. They're steps along a path. Physiologically, this changes how the body responds. The stress response is still activated, but it doesn't escalate as easily. Focus returns faster. Recovery happens sooner. A clear reason to act gives the mind something stable to hold on to, which quiets rumination. Purpose also directs energy outward towards service, craft, protection, or creation. That outward movement interrupts cycles of self-criticism. In this way, meaning becomes emotional support. It doesn't erase fear. It simply gives fear a safe place to lean until it can breathe again. Compassion training can increase altruism in measurable ways. When a person spends time actively practicing compassion, even through guided imagination or meditation, specific brain regions involved in understanding others' feelings become more responsive. Heart rate patterns begin to reflect calm and receptivity rather than defensiveness. Over weeks and months, this inner training begins to change outward behavior. People become more patient in conflicts. They interrupt less. They offer more comfort. They give without needing recognition. This generosity isn't about politeness. It's about nervous system readiness. The body actually becomes more willing to care. What's beautiful is that this change often creates a feedback loop. Acts of kindness strengthen connection, and connection deepens well-being, which further supports kindness. Compassion then stops being something you do and becomes something you are. People who express awe regularly report higher life satisfaction. Awe is the feeling of standing before something vast and realizing you're part of it. It can occur in the presence of a mountain or a galaxy, but it can also occur quietly while watching sunlight move across a floor. In moments of awe, self-concern lessens, time expands, breathing deepens, and the mind stops clinging and starts receiving. Studies suggest that people who allow themselves to feel awe frequently experience less stress, more generosity, and a stronger sense that life is meaningful. This sense of wonder changes how they interpret everything else. Frustrations seem smaller. Gratitude feels greater. Even loneliness eases because awe reminds the mind that it belongs to a world that's enormous, ancient, and alive. In this way, awe isn't just an emotion, it's medicine. Personality affects how you interpret randomness and coincidence. Some people experience a strange coincidence and feel the universe is communicating. Others experience the same coincidence and think only about probability. These differences in interpretation reflect stable styles of thinking and feeling. Individuals with intuitive or imaginative styles tend to weave synchronicity into a story. They see alignment, meaning, and guidance. Individuals who favor analytical thinking and structure tend to see chance, statistics, and random noise. Both approaches are deeply human. One style transforms uncertainty into narrative comfort. The other style transforms uncertainty into logical calm. The way a mind explains an unexpected alignment of events becomes a kind of mirror. It reveals whether that mind rests more easily in wonder or more easily in control, or somewhere gently between the two. Superstitions often arise from high pattern sensitivity. The human brain was built to detect signals that might indicate danger, even if those signals later turn out to be nothing. Hearing a sound in tall grass and assuming danger was once a survival advantage. That same instinct remains, but now appears in symbolic form. When two events happen close together, the mind links them. If an outcome mattered emotionally, the link becomes strong. Over time, the mind can begin to assign power to rituals, gestures, objects, or timing. People who have especially sensitive pattern detection tend to form and keep these associations more easily. The ritual then brings comfort, and the comfort reinforces the ritual. It's not simple superstition. It's ancient vigilance living inside modern thought, trying to create safety in a world that still feels unpredictable. Belief in fate correlates with lower perceived control. When a person believes life unfolds according to destiny, choice can begin to feel less important, almost secondary. This outlook can protect against regret and guilt. If an outcome was meant to happen, then there's less room for self-blame and less anxiety about the road not taken. At the same time, a strong belief in fate can also lower motivation to act because effort may feel less necessary. Psychologists observe that this pattern can bring comfort during chaos, but passivity during challenges. The most balanced place seems to be a quiet middle ground where meaning is welcomed, but agency is still claimed. In that space, a person can feel guided without feeling helpless. They can accept limitations without surrendering participation in their own story. Personality influences how you experience art and music. Art doesn't live solely in the painting or the melody. It lives in the nervous system that receives it. A person who is highly open to experience may feel music almost physically as color, pressure, warmth, or electricity under the skin. Someone who is highly reflective may use art as a mirror, diving inward and finding memories, future selves, and private longings inside a single sound or image. Someone who is highly energetic may seek rhythm, volume, movement, the pulse of being alive in a shared space. Another person may prefer intricacy and subtlety, the quiet turning gears of harmony and detail. The same song can soothe one listener and unsettle another. The same painting can feel like comfort to one person and confrontation to another. The response is personal, honest, and revealing. In that way, art becomes a conversation between creation and character, spoken without words. People high in openness feel chills more often during music. The sensation of shivering during a piece of music isn't random. It's the body's way of acknowledging wonder. When a person's mind is especially open to new experiences, sensory and emotional regions of the brain communicate with extraordinary intensity. Sound doesn't stop at the ear. It spreads into the nervous system, touching memory, imagery, and emotion at once. A melody that surprises, a harmony that resolves unexpectedly, or a voice that trembles with feeling can trigger an entire wave of neural response. Dopamine increases, skin tingles, and the listener feels the borders of the self momentarily dissolve. This physical reaction is more common in those who approach life with curiosity and imagination because their brains are wired to explore rather than defend. Each musical moment becomes a tiny revelation, a reminder that beauty isn't only heard, but felt completely and involuntarily as wonder moving through the body. Extroverts prefer rhythmic music. Introverts prefer complex melodies. Every rhythm and melody connects differently to the nervous system depending on temperament. People who draw energy from social connection often gravitate towards songs that pulse with steady, driving beats. The repetition mirrors movement and interaction, activating motor regions that link sound to motion. Dancing, tapping, and singing along release oxytocin and dopamine, enhancing pleasure through shared experience. Those who find their energy in solitude, by contrast, tend to favor intricacy over rhythm. Their attention drifts naturally toward melody and harmonic subtlety, where reflection replaces motion. They often find deeper satisfaction in the shifting tension and resolution of complex music, where the mind can wander and the emotions unfold inwardly. Neither preference is superior. Each reflects a distinct way of balancing stimulation and serenity. Through music, the brain rehearses its favorite state, either the outward pulse of connection or the inward flow of contemplation that defines its sense of home. Personality shapes how you interpret abstract art. Standing before abstract art reveals as much about the observer as about the canvas. When the mind encounters color and shape without literal meaning, it must create its own. People high in openness often feel exhilarated by this freedom. Their brains activate imagination networks that fill the unknown with emotional and symbolic detail. They experience abstraction as possibility, a mirror for their own creative thought. More structured personalities, however, may experience mild unease at the absence of order. They search instinctively for recognizable forms, for a sense of control. This difference is neurological as much as psychological. The creative mind thrives in ambiguity, while the organized mind thrives in clarity. Yet, both can find beauty there if approached gently. Abstract art becomes a dialogue between chaos and comprehension, an external test of how comfortable one is with uncertainty, and how willing the self is to find meaning where none is offered. Humor preference reveals emotional resilience. The way a person laughs tells the story of how they cope with difficulty. Those who find joy in clever or absurd humor often use laughter as a form of reframing, a neurological reset that turns threat into play. The act of finding something funny releases tension in the prefrontal cortex and amygdala, soothing emotional intensity and restoring perspective. Dark or ironic humor, when genuine rather than cruel, can signal deep emotional flexibility. It shows that the mind has learned to survive distress without losing its sense of perspective. Gentle, empathetic humor reflects comfort with vulnerability and an ability to share feelings safely. Humor in all its forms builds resilience because it reconnects the rational and emotional systems after stress has pulled them apart. A single moment of laughter teaches the brain that lightness can coexist with truth, and that even pain can be softened by the shared breath of amusement. Those high in agreeableness prefer harmony in both art and relationships. The same neural circuits that respond to social cooperation also respond to musical consonance. For people who prize empathy, forgiveness, and unity, harmony itself feels rewarding. Their brains interpret smooth blends of tone and gentle color as symbols of safety and trust. Harsh dissonance can create discomfort, mirroring the unease of conflict in human connection. This isn't about taste alone. It reflects a physiological link between sensory and social processing. The same systems that light up when people reconcile after disagreement may glow in response to chords that resolve gracefully after tension. Even visual art, with flowing lines and balanced symmetry, tends to bring comfort to those whose temperament favors peace. For such individuals, art is more than expression. It's emotional alignment. It satisfies the same craving that drives them toward kindness, mutual understanding, and the quiet rhythm of coexistence. People high in conscientiousness prefer structure even in aesthetics. Order, proportion, and intention hold deep appeal for those who value discipline and reliability. In art or music, this translates to an appreciation for balance, rhythm, and careful design. Structured forms reassure the mind that patterns exist and that effort leads to coherence. This is the same reward mechanism that encourages organization in daily life. Predictability offers calm, not boredom. Each measure of music or stroke of symmetry feels like a conversation between precision and patience. Neuroscientists find that conscientious individuals show stronger activation in brain regions linked to planning and pattern detection when they encounter organized beauty. Structure to them isn't cold, it's a promise, It tells the nervous system that meaning can be built piece by piece, that complexity doesn't require chaos, and that beauty itself can be a form of order translated into color, form, and sound. Creative personalities are more likely to experience flow states, the state known as flow when time disappears, thought becomes effortless, and awareness merges with action, is most common among people who live comfortably within imagination. Their minds are skilled at tuning out self-consciousness while sustaining focus. During flow, the prefrontal cortex temporarily quiets, reducing the voice of inner critique. At the same time, dopamine increases, enhancing motivation and pleasure. Creativity thrives in this equilibrium between concentration and freedom. Artists, scientists, athletes, and even skilled listeners can experience it. The brain behaves like a perfectly tuned instrument, each region harmonizing with the others in rhythm. This state can feel spiritual, yet it's grounded in biology. The more a person practices curiosity and openness, the easier it becomes to slip into that timeless awareness where effort fades and the act of creation feels less like work and more like remembering who you are when the world is silent. Flow feels timeless because self-awareness quiets down. During deep immersion, the internal clock loses its authority. Neural systems that normally track time and monitor self-image reduce their activity, allowing the present moment to expand. The brain's attention networks align so completely with the task that there's no energy left for self-commentary. This absence of inner narration produces the strange sensation that minutes vanish or stretch endlessly. Physiologically, heart rate and breathing stabilize and stress hormones drop. Creativity and performance peak because no energy is wasted on doubt. When self-awareness returns, people often describe the experience as euphoric, though calm. The paradox is that by forgetting oneself, one becomes most fully engaged. This timelessness has been reported in every field from painting to mathematics to meditation. It's not escape, it's union. The mind and its work, moving as one continuous, wordless motion that feels infinite while it lasts. The drive to seek novelty is wired deep in the brain. Curiosity and exploration have ancient roots in survival. The same neurotransmitter systems that once pushed early humans to find new food sources or safer shelters now encourage the search for stimulation and change. Dopamine surges each time the brain encounters something unfamiliar, rewarding discovery and motivating continued exploration. This built-in system shapes everything from creativity to risk-taking. It's strongest in some people because of small genetic variations that influence dopamine receptors and reward sensitivity. For them, monotony feels stifling, and the unknown feels alive. Novelty seeking has guided migration, invention, and art for tens of thousands of years. It's both impulse and inspiration. At its best, it drives progress and wonder. At its most unrestrained, it can slip into recklessness. Yet, the core instinct remains the same, a quiet biological reminder that life grows through reaching beyond the familiar. Adventure-seeking may have evolved to spread human genes. Throughout human history, survival favored not only those who stayed safe, but also those who dared to wander. Individuals drawn toward exploration carried traits that allowed populations to expand into new lands, adapt to changing climates, and meet unfamiliar challenges. This restlessness became part of the species' emotional architecture. The same temperament that propels a person to climb mountains or cross oceans once guided ancestors to seek better hunting grounds or new alliances. Biologists have even traced this pattern to subtle genetic influences linked to dopamine regulation, which shape how rewarding novelty feels. While not everyone craves adventure, those who do often act as catalysts for collective growth. Their risk becomes everyone's inheritance. The human story itself is a record of curiosity moving outward, written by hearts that refused to settle and minds that felt most alive at the edge of the unknown. Personality influences dream content and recall. Sleep doesn't silence the self, it amplifies it. During rapid eye movement stages, the emotional centers of the brain remain active, while logic and inhibition sleep. The result is a theater where personality takes center stage without restraint. People who are imaginative by nature tend to dream with more vivid color, texture, and storyline. Those inclined toward anxiety experience dreams charged with tension, mirroring their waking vigilance. Meanwhile, reflective or conscientious individuals often report dreams that resemble problem-solving exercises. Memory systems consolidate by weaving real experiences into symbolic narratives, and the tone of those narratives reflects temperament. Even recall varies. Open, introspective minds tend to bring fragments back to waking consciousness, while pragmatic personalities let them fade. Each night's dream cycle becomes a private dialogue between emotion and identity, an unrecorded conversation where the mind quietly reveals what it believes about itself. Extroverts dream of social events more often. The dreaming mind reflects the world it knows best. For those whose energy flows through connection, sleep doesn't end the social story, it continues it in symbolic form. Conversations, gatherings, laughter, and shared adventures appear frequently in their dreams. The same brain regions responsible for empathy and social cognition remain active, constructing imagined communities that mirror real-life preferences. Extroverts often process their relationships and experiences through this nighttime stage play, rehearsing future interactions or revisiting recent ones. Their dreams may carry emotional warmth or excitement rather than isolation, serving as a kind of overnight renewal of belonging. These patterns reveal that dreaming isn't only the brain's maintenance cycle, it's a continuation of personality, where even unconscious life prefers the same rhythm of human presence that fuels waking joy. Neurotic dreamers have more vivid nightmares. When anxiety is a frequent companion in waking life, it tends to follow the mind into sleep. Emotional centers such as the amygdala and anterior cingulate cortex remain highly reactive during dreaming, producing scenes charged with fear, loss, or helplessness. These nightmares aren't punishments. They're the brain's attempt to rehearse survival, to practice responding to distress without real danger. Unfortunately, high emotional sensitivity can make these scenarios feel intensely real. People who experience chronic worry or rumination often wake with the same tension they fell asleep with, their bodies having lived through simulated turmoil. Yet, these dreams also offer opportunity. By reflecting the mind's hidden conflicts, they create openings for awareness and healing. In therapy, understanding recurring nightmare themes often reveals the unspoken fears that drive waking patterns, transforming even distressing dreams into guides for emotional growth. Creative people experience lucid dreams more frequently. Lucid dreaming, the state in which a dreamer becomes aware of dreaming and can sometimes influence events, occurs more often in individuals with highly imaginative minds. Studies suggest that creative thinkers have greater communication between conscious and unconscious processing networks, allowing awareness to slip across boundaries more easily. In waking life, they navigate imagination fluidly. In sleep, that same flexibility grants access to the dream world. Lucid dreams can feel astonishingly vivid. The dreamer might choose to fly, to compose, to explore. This heightened state activates both sensory and reasoning regions simultaneously, blending fantasy with logic. Many artists and scientists have drawn inspiration from such experiences, where invention feels effortless and emotion feels boundless. Lucid dreaming isn't only a curiosity. It's a testament to how porous the walls of consciousness can become when imagination trusts itself fully, even in sleep. Some personality traits predict how likely you are to sleepwalk. Sleepwalking is a strange twilight state, where parts of the brain remain asleep while others awaken. Research shows that people with strong tendencies toward impulsivity or external stimulation are slightly more prone to it. Their arousal systems activate more easily even in rest, pulling the body into motion, while the conscious mind remains unaware. Genetics play a role, but temperament influences triggers. Stress, irregular sleep, and emotional overload make the phenomenon more common. This behavior reveals how the mind and body sometimes negotiate control unevenly. The sleeper walks through the dark in partial awareness, as if personality itself is stretching between worlds. In morning light, memory often vanishes, leaving only traces of mystery. The event serves as a reminder that consciousness isn't a single state but a spectrum, and that even in sleep temperament continues to write its signature. People high in openness recall dreams in greater detail. Memory and imagination intertwine during sleep. Those who live with curiosity and introspection tend to retrieve dreams with remarkable clarity. Their attention naturally lingers on internal experiences, which helps them notice and retain fragments upon waking. The hippocampus, responsible for storing new memories, shows heightened activation in such individuals during rapid eye movement sleep, allowing images to imprint more deeply. When morning comes, those imprints feel like vivid narratives rather than fleeting sensations. This tendency makes dreaming an extension of creative life. The same openness that fuels artistic expression during the day enriches the symbolic storytelling of night. A vivid recall can nurture insight, as people recognize emotional themes or unresolved thoughts emerging from beneath awareness. Remembering becomes a form. Of course, studying yourself is a soft and subtle way of learning the language your mind uses when your thoughts are drifting off to sleep. Even the position you sleep in can show how you're feeling. The way your body rests is like a quiet language all its own. People who curl up in a ball often have a strong need to protect themselves or are very sensitive. People who stretch out and take up a lot of space tend to feel confident and secure. Researchers who study sleep positions have found clear connections between how you sleep and how you feel. The fetal position is often linked to feeling anxious or cautious, while sleeping on your back is linked to confidence and being open. Of course, your posture changes during the night, reflecting what happened during the day. Tension in your shoulders or hips might show stress that you haven't talked about. Relaxed arms and legs often mean you're feeling at peace. Your body can tell the truth even when your voice doesn't, showing how safe you feel deep down.